Daniel was known throughout the campus of Ambrose Ali University as one of the most cheerful and intelligent students in the Department of Chemical Engineering. His laughter had a way of filling a room, and his wit could lighten even the heaviest of moods. At 27, he was finally on the verge of graduating, a milestone that should have been marked with joy and celebration. But behind Daniel's ever-present smile and easygoing nature lay a reality far more complicated than most people knew. To many, Daniel appeared to be the embodiment of a carefree life. He rarely showed signs of worry, and his ability to remain calm in the face of pressure was almost legendary among his peers. Yet, deep within him, there were fears and silent frustrations that only few could imagine. These feelings were not unique to Daniel alone, they were the shared struggles of countless students living in off-campus housing across Nigeria. In the town of Ekpoma, where the university is located, life outside the school grounds told a different story. While the lecture halls and classrooms might have offered a semblance of normalcy, the off-campus neighborhoods painted a much grimmer picture. For students living in these areas, survival often meant more than just passing exams or keeping up with assignments. It meant navigating a chaotic environment where safety was never guaranteed. Ekpoma was often described as a jungle, not because of its terrain, but because of the constant power struggle between various student groups known to wield influence and fear. These groups, popularly referred to as campus fraternities, included names that sent chills down the spines of even the bravest students, names like the Black Axe, Vikings, and Air Lords. They were not just clubs or social organizations, they were secretive groups that moved in silence, their presence felt in both subtle and overwhelming ways. In such an environment, students who didn't belong to any of these groups often faced more hardship. They were more vulnerable to intimidation, harassment, and sometimes even worse. For many, the safest route was to either blend into the background or align themselves with one group for protection. But Daniel was different. Though innocent at heart and someone who never saw trouble, he was not the kind of person to be pushed around. He carried himself with a quiet strength that many mistook for arrogance or fearlessness. In truth, Daniel simply believed in himself and in standing up for what he felt was right. He was not quick to back down, especially when he sensed that his rights were being trampled upon. This attitude, while admirable, often put him in difficult situations. His refusal to be intimidated or manipulated made him a target for those who were used to getting their way through force or fear. More than once, he found himself in confrontations with members of these powerful student groups, not because he went looking for trouble, but because trouble had a way of finding him when he refused to conform. Over time, rumors began to swirl. Some students speculated that Daniel might actually be affiliated with one of the groups, simply because of how boldly he carried himself. How else could someone walk so confidently in a place where fear was currency? But those who knew him well understood that Daniel's strength came not from any secret association, but from his firm belief in justice and self-worth. He was a man navigating a dangerous landscape with nothing but courage and conviction as his compass. And while that made life more difficult in a town like Ekpoma, it also made his story one worth telling. Daniel's first encounter with the dark underbelly of student life at Ambrose Ali University happened on what was supposed to be an ordinary, joyful evening. It began with an invitation to a birthday party, a celebration hosted by one of his course mates. The invitation hadn't seemed unusual. University life often came with events like this, and for someone as sociable and lively as Daniel, it felt natural to attend. He didn't go alone. At his side was Angelina, his girlfriend, a strikingly beautiful young woman whose presence could turn heads in any room she entered. Angelina possessed a kind of charm that was hard to ignore. Her smile was disarming, her skin smooth like porcelain, and her elegance unmatched. If there had ever been a beauty contest at Ambrose Ali University, many believed she would have won it without breaking a sweat. Though she had countless admirers and secret suitors, her heart belonged to Daniel. Their bond was deep and sincere, so strong, in fact, that their relationship became the envy of many on campus. As they made their way to the venue of the party, Daniel was in high spirits. He expected a typical student gathering, music, dancing, and laughter. But the moment they arrived, something felt off. The atmosphere was dense, not just with sound and chatter, but with something more intense, something unsettling. As he scanned the environment, Daniel couldn't help but notice that the crowd looked far from the regular group of cheerful students he was used to seeing. The party didn't feel like a simple get-together, it felt more like a gathering of individuals who lived by their own rules. The air was thick with smoke, and clusters of students were seen drinking heavily, leaning against walls and holding onto their partners possessively. There was an edge in the way some of them laughed, an aggressive undertone that hinted at something more than fun. Still, Daniel tried to make the best of the moment. He and Angelina found a relatively quiet spot and took their seats. He ordered a couple of drinks, keeping it moderate. Daniel was never one to overindulge, and he certainly didn't smoke. In fact, he had a strong allergy to heavy smoke and avoided environments where it lingered in the air. Tonight was no exception. He already felt the unease creeping up his skin. His plan was simple: stay for a while, sip on his drink, greet the celebrant, and then quietly leave. But as time went on, and the music played louder, he started to feel a little more relaxed. The discomfort gave way to laughter, and eventually, he found himself dancing with Angelina in the middle of the room. The two moved in sync, a sight that drew the attention of more than just a few eyes in the party. It wasn't long before Daniel noticed something peculiar. A small group of men had fixed their attention on Angelina. Their stares were neither subtle nor respectful. They whispered among themselves, nodding in Daniel's direction as if plotting something. Daniel saw it all, but remained calm. He wasn't the type to cause a scene or jump to conclusions. Still, he was watchful, alert. Eventually, one of the men broke away from the group and walked up to them. He was confident in his steps and had the air of someone used to get in his way. Without offering a proper greeting, he leaned close and said to Daniel, "My boss wants to have a word with your girlfriend." Angelina didn't hesitate in her response. She simply shook her head and said, "I'm not interested." Daniel nodded in agreement, his voice firm but polite. She said no. That should be enough. The man's expression changed immediately. What started as a smug look twisted into annoyance. He wasn't expecting a refusal, and certainly not one that was backed by someone he likely didn't consider a threat. Tension began to rise between the two as the man insisted again, his tone more aggressive this time. Angelina stood her ground, and so did Daniel. What followed was a sudden outburst. Words turned into shoves, and before long, a full-blown fight erupted between Daniel and the man. In the struggle, Daniel managed to defend himself and landed a blow that left the other guy injured. The music stopped. The crowd reacted. The energy in the room shifted from party mode to panic. It was only then that Daniel began to realize what he might have gotten himself into. The men he had just tangled with were no ordinary partygoers. Whispers confirmed his fears. He had unknowingly gotten into a fight with members of one of the most feared groups on campus. Though no one said the name aloud, it was clear these were affiliates of the infamous Black Axe group, known across campuses in Nigeria for their influence and intimidation. As more people gathered to break up the fight, a few concerned students quickly stepped in and pulled Daniel and Angelina aside. They urged them to leave immediately, guiding them through a back exit and helping them escape the scene before things escalated further. As they made their way back home that night, Daniel's thoughts were heavy. He had stood up for his girlfriend and himself, but he also knew that he had now crossed an invisible line. The men he fought with weren't going to forget. He had challenged them publicly, and such defiance was not taken lightly. Word soon spread that the group had sworn to make his life difficult on campus. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter in Daniel's life at Ambrose Ali University, a chapter filled with uncertainty, caution, and the lingering shadow of revenge. It was his first direct encounter with the darker side of student life, and though he had stood his ground, he now had to walk carefully, knowing that danger could come from any corner. After the tension-filled night at the party, Daniel did his best to move on with his life. The altercation with the group of feared young men, believed to be members of the Black Axe, still lingered in his memory like a faint scar, visible only to him, yet impossible to forget. On the surface, he carried himself with his usual calmness, going about his daily routine with a smile. But deep inside, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite over. He remembered the threats hurled at him the night of the party, threats whispered under breath but heavy with meaning. Yet, nothing happened immediately after that night, and time, as it often does, made the experience seem like a distant event. Daniel convinced himself that perhaps the entire ordeal had passed, that maybe the boys had moved on, or that it was just talk meant to scare him. So when he received a call from his family asking him to come home to the village, he didn't hesitate. It had been a while since he had seen his people, and they mentioned there was something important they wanted to discuss with him. He packed a small bag, locked up his room in his off-campus lodge, and made the journey home. Daniel's village was a peaceful place, a sharp contrast to the ever-busy, often chaotic life in Ekpoma. The calmness of home offered him a kind of healing that the city could not. He reconnected with his parents, sat under the moonlight with his uncles, shared jokes with childhood friends, and helped with a few tasks around the house. For 3 days, he was surrounded by love, nature, and simplicity. It was just what his soul needed. But all good things, as they say, come to an end. On the 4th morning, Daniel packed his things, bid farewell to his family, and boarded a bus back to campus. He felt refreshed and ready to resume his academic journey. The break had done wonders for his state of mind. However, his peace was short-lived. The moment he arrived at his lodge and stepped into the compound, he sensed that something was wrong. The gatekeeper, a middle-aged man known for his love of storytelling, rushed up to him with a worried look. There was no friendly joke or casual greeting this time. Instead, the man's voice was filled with concern. "Oh God, Daniel, you never hear," he said, barely letting Daniel catch his breath from the journey. "Hear what?" Daniel asked, confusion clouding his face. The gatekeeper took a deep breath and explained that 2 days ago, while Daniel was away in the village, a group of unknown young men had stormed the compound looking for him. They were aggressive and restless. When they realized he wasn't around, they forced their way into his room. Unable to find him, they turned their anger on his belongings. Daniel hurried to his room, heart pounding. As he unlocked the door, the sight that greeted him made his chest tighten. His once organized room was in complete disarray. His television had been smashed, glass shattered across the floor. His DVD cassette player, something he had bought with savings from a part-time tutoring job, was lying broken in the corner. Clothes were tossed everywhere, and his mattress had been slashed in places. He stood in silence, taking it all in. It didn't take long for him to piece the puzzle together. There was no need to ask questions or speculate. Deep down, he knew exactly who was behind the attack. It had to be the same group from the party, the ones who had felt insulted by his refusal to surrender his girlfriend, the ones who had threatened retaliation. They had finally made their move, striking when they believed he would be most vulnerable. But as bad as the damage was, Daniel also recognized how lucky he had been. Had he been around when they came, things could have taken a much darker turn. The thought alone sent a chill through him. Property could be replaced, but one's life and safety were far more valuable. Without wasting time, Daniel reported the incident to the local security operatives within the area. These were community-based officers who were familiar with the happenings around the student lodges. They listened carefully to his account and assured him that they would investigate. They promised to keep an eye on the area and to do their best to track down those responsible. Daniel thanked them, though he knew that in places like Ekpoma, justice often moved slowly, especially when powerful student groups were involved. He returned to his room, swept up the broken glass, and began putting things back in order. He counted his losses quietly, his electronics, a few clothes, and some personal items, but more importantly, he counted his blessings. He had been absent when the attack happened. That alone was something to be thankful for. He could have been hurt. Things could have gone much worse. He looked around his room once more, then sat on the edge of his bed and sighed. This incident marked another turning point in Daniel's journey. It was no longer just a matter of standing his ground at a party. The situation had become more serious, personal, even. Now he had to move with more caution, knowing full well that the shadows of that one night were still following him. Despite everything that had happened in the past, despite the threats, the invasion of his lodge, and the destruction of his belongings, life on campus seemed to gradually return to normal for Daniel. He chose not to dwell on the past too much, even though a part of him still carried a silent weight of caution. He was careful now, more than ever. He avoided staying out late. He stayed clear of places that felt unsafe or where he might run into any known troublemakers. In his mind, it was better to remain unnoticed than to stand out in the eyes of the wrong people. Weeks passed by, and Daniel focused on his academics and personal growth. He attended his lectures, completed his assignments, and spent time with Angelina whenever possible. Their relationship remained strong, a source of comfort amidst all the chaos life had thrown at him. Daniel was doing his best to heal from the trauma, rebuild his peace, and live a quiet student life. Then one particular evening, just as he was settling into his room to rest after a long day, his phone rang. It was Angelina. The moment he answered, he knew something was wrong. Her voice trembled, and he could hear the distress in her tone. She was sobbing quietly, trying to compose herself enough to speak. "Daniel," she said through tears, "they collected my phone, some guys just took it from me off campus." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Are you okay? Where are you calling me from?" he asked quickly, already reaching for his shoes. "I'm at a call center. They are still around the area. They didn't hurt me, but they took my phone. They said it was because I didn't greet them," she said, confused and shaken. "I don't understand why." Daniel was furious but tried to keep his voice calm. "Don't leave that area. I'll be there shortly." He knew the area well. It wasn't far from where some off-campus students lived, but it was also a place that had gained a reputation for harboring campus roughnecks, young men who carried themselves with boldness and often used fear to get their way. When Daniel arrived, the air was heavy with tension. He quickly spotted Angelina and walked up to her, asking if she was okay. She nodded, still visibly shaken. Then, without wasting time, he made his way to confront the group of boys that had seized her phone. What he met, however, was nothing short of open hostility. The young men didn't care for reason or explanation. Instead, they responded with threats and insults. When Daniel tried to speak with them peacefully, asking why they had taken the phone and hoping to reach some kind of resolution, they mocked him and warned him to leave immediately. Daniel's presence only seemed to anger them more. Before he could react, things escalated. One of the boys shoved him, and in a matter of seconds, others joined in. Daniel was surrounded and manhandled, pushed, slapped, and beaten right there in the open. The worst part of it all was that it happened in front of Angelina. The humiliation was unbearable. When they were done with him, Daniel walked away with a swollen face, bruised ego, and a heavy heart. He had been deeply humiliated, not just as a man, but as someone who had tried to stand up for what was right. He didn't speak much on the way home, but one thing had changed in him that night: his patience had run out. He had previously avoided involving law enforcement in his campus affairs. Even during the earlier encounter with the Black Axe group, he had chosen to keep the matter low-key. But this time, things had gone too far. He knew some police officers personally, professionals who had earned his trust, and for the first time, he decided to bring them into the matter. The next day, Daniel contacted the police and explained everything. The officers acted swiftly. They conducted a raid and managed to arrest 3 of the boys involved. Others fled, but the 3 in custody were taken to the station and locked up. The police also succeeded in retrieving Angelina's phone, which was returned to her a few days later. She was beyond grateful and praised Daniel for standing up for her once again. But while justice seemed to have been served on the surface, underneath, the situation had become even more dangerous. Daniel didn't know it yet, but that one bold step, calling in the police, would set into motion a deadly consequence. In the world of campus violence, some people view the involvement of law enforcement as a betrayal, a line that should never be crossed. Unknown to Daniel, he had unknowingly provoked the anger of another hidden group whose affiliations were not even known, unlike the group from the party who had clearly shown ties to the Black Axe. Days passed and life resumed again. Daniel tried to put the incident behind him, thinking perhaps this would be the end of the troubles. He continued with his daily routine, attending classes and spending time with Angelina. Then came that tragic evening. Daniel decided to visit Angelina at her lodge, as he often did. He brought her some food, snacks, and little gifts, simple things to brighten her evening. They spent time together, laughing, talking about school, and making future plans. It was a sweet moment, and nothing about that night hinted at what was to come. When it was time to leave, Daniel hugged Angelina tightly. "See you in school tomorrow," he whispered, smiling warmly. "Be safe," she said, holding his hand for a moment longer before finally letting go. Daniel stepped out of the compound, walking calmly into the night. But just as he reached the main gate, a sudden, sharp sound pierced the air. 2 gunshots. Before anyone could react, Daniel fell to the ground. The street fell silent. The few bystanders nearby froze in shock. The gunmen, whoever they were, disappeared into the shadows as quickly as they had come. Angelina heard the noise and rushed outside, only to see the man she loved lying still on the ground. She screamed his name over and over, but there was no response. Daniel was gone. Just like that. News of his death spread like wildfire across the campus. Students mourned. Lecturers were shaken. Friends cried. But the question on everyone's lips remained unanswered: who did it? Was it the Black Axe group from the party? Or was it the boys he had gotten arrested after they took Angelina's phone? To this day, no one truly knows who the attackers were. The identities of the gunmen were never revealed, and no arrests were ever made. The incident was one of many painful reminders of the dangerous undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of campus life. Daniel's story ended in sorrow. A life full of promise was cut short not by accident, but by the choices of others, choices fueled by pride, ego, and a culture of violence that had plagued campuses for far too long.